All right, Thor, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, how we doing?
Doing very good. Last time I talked to you, it was dreary outside, and I joked about the part of the world you're from. You might be used to that, and I know my ancestry is. So guess what it is today? It's still dreary outside.
No
So
way.
some bad luck, but that's winter in eastern Tennessee. Appreciate you joining me. I know people are going to love the things we talk about, but maybe you could just start us off with a little bit about yourself, both maybe some personal tidbits and then your background.
Cool. Well, firstly, on the weather, because here in Scotland, we love talking about the weather, man.
Absolutely.
We've got something today called thunder snow.
Okay.
And I think the newspapers have made it up, but they say we've got thunder snow coming. And I've got to drive somewhere tonight because
Uh-oh.
I'm working on my own startup actually all day tomorrow. I've got a long day with the founder. So I'm looking forward to the thunder snow with my little two-wheel drive VW Golf.
Sounds
It's
like
going to be awesome.
Sounds like a book or a movie title, right? Thunder Snow. It's the next James Bond movie.
The last time I experienced weird weather like that was actually flying from Denver down to Houston. It's a couple of years ago, but we were flying down and we were late to set off from Denver, and then we got told there was some weird weather in Houston, and they didn't say what it was. Or I'd have said, "Let me off the plane." And when we got there, it was the worst thunderstorm I have ever seen. And we're in this little pencil jet, and they wouldn't even serve alcohol, so that was a problem. It was so rough, man. And they tried to land a couple of times, and we were all over the place. And they went to Shreveport, is it? Shreveport,
Louisiana. Yep.
Yeah, they flew for flipping hours to get to Shreveport. We parked up there in the middle of the night, and this old guy with a handlebar mustache was gassing up. I could see him outside. And so I went up to the cockpit and I says, "Excuse me, I'd like to get off." I says, "I've only got a game of golf in Houston tomorrow. Can I get out?" And the captain was a young guy, and he says, I won't try and do the accent, but he said, "Hey, buddy, I don't want to die either." He says, if it's like that again when we go back to Houston, he says, we're going to go off somewhere else and we're going to bed down for the night.
And you're thinking, wonderful.
Well, the thing is, we took off. Oh, well, first of all, there was some crazy storm chaser guy in the back of the plane.
He was
He had
loving it.
he had a big top hat on. He was like a total weirdo, and he was shouting out to the whole plane, "Hey, y'all, we got a thunder. No, we got a, what was he said? We got a tornado warning in Houston now. We got a tornado." And I was like, and that's
You're like, I don't want to hear any of this at all.
So they wouldn't let me off the plane because the airport was shut and there would be no rental cars or anything, and they couldn't let me off the plane. We were just out on the tarmac on the airport. So we get to Houston, we land. It's 5 a.m. So we've set off from Denver at like 6 p.m. So this flight has turned into this nightmare, nearly 12-hour ride. It's like 3-hour flight. So here's the thing, though: the female first officer, who is very attractive. I'm a happily married man, but she's a very attractive young lady. So this is the first officer of the plane, who'd obviously been there when I had the conversation with the captain. As I got off, she came out of the cockpit, came onto the air bridge with me, and she said, "Are you all right?" And she gave me a hug. Southern hospitality, buddy.
Southern hospitality at its best.
That's why I'm on your show. It was down to that young lady. I just love the South.
You like being around the Southerners, and
I love it.
you're ready to be on a Southern startup podcast. That's fantastic, man. Great story.
Well, the thing is, I have a bit of experience with Southerners. Would you count New Orleans as Southern?
It's in, Louisiana is part of the South. It's not Southeastern, which is different. People get a little picky about that, but it is a Southern, but they are different than the rest of us.
So this young lady, I was a roomie. She called me roomie, but her and I, she was from New Orleans, and we were in Sydney, Australia. I was at drama school there, so I'm telling you a bit about my background.
Absolutely.
That was in 2002, and we lived in this big house called the Zoo. Now, if you know Sydney, or you might have seen it on the TV, they did a TV show about this place. 30 people from all over the world living in this one big house.
Yeah, I'm picturing Real World from MTV.
Yeah, I think that rings a bell. Anyway, I shared a room with this young lady from New Orleans. So in 2007, we traveled from Austin, where we'd lived in a trailer in Wimberley, Texas. We lived in a trailer there for a month. And then we drove across to New Orleans. And then we drove the length of the U.S. all the way up to Niagara Falls, into Canada, and then over to New York. And that was with my little daughter, who was 2 years old then. But our experience back to the South, and why I was excited to be on your show, apart from the fact that you came highly recommended, was that our experience in the South was a really positive one. As a little family, me, my wife, and my little girl, we were treated with a lot of respect, a lot of what's the right word? Just friendliness. We just had a great experience. I'm not saying the Northerners were mean, but they are different.
They're a little more
It's
direct. They're a little more
yeah,
direct.
maybe that's what it is. But you asked me about myself, so that was a bit of a
Yeah,
tangent
great
there.
story.
I mean,
Great story.
I have worked a fair bit in the US and a little bit in startups. I ended up doing some work at MIT. I wasn't there for years or anything. I was back and forth from Scotland to MIT. And the way that happened, I was working on a pitch with it was an oil business in Wyoming. And the guy there, he was putting together this pitch. It was a big pitch to do with the shale plays in, I might pronounce this wrong, the Bakken.
Yep.
And he needed to impress like investors basically. He was bringing different sides together on this deal. I'd worked for this oil company before. He knew that, and I was obviously thought of well enough that he wanted to involve me in this project, this pitching project. So coming from Wyoming, obviously that's a long way. A long way from Scotland, but we thought about a halfway point. So we thought, where's a good halfway point? And he said New York or Boston, halfway between Scotland and Wyoming, time-wise. So we both decided Boston would be better. So we were going to meet in Boston. And I thought, well, what else can I do in Boston while I'm there? Because I'm always thinking of useful things to do or people to meet. I love meeting new people. So I did a Google search and hey ho, MIT's in Boston. That's cool. So I put together a cold pitch to a guy whose name had been referenced to me, Bill Owlett, who runs the entrepreneurial part, as it were. He runs let's see if I get the name right, Martin Trust Center for Entrepreneurship. And I cold pitched the guy, and I used the same principle, the same process that I use for any pitch or presentation. That's something that I'm happy to share with your listeners.
We'll get to it.
I've got a one-page PDF of how I built that email out.
Okay.
And I pitched him, and I pitched someone at Babson as well. So I pitched two, and I got 50% strike rate. Bill got back to me same day, said, this looks interesting. And what I pitched him was for me to come and speak for their young entrepreneur tech teams. And so it happened. When I was over there working on the pitch with this guy, I went in and spoke at MIT, and we got on well, and I ended up becoming more engaged there after that. And that was how it came about.
And was that teaching some of the similar things? And we'll get to your background sort of with pitching and those type of things. Was that teaching similar classes or similar talks along the way?
No, the talk, I only did the talk one time. So that, in my mind, that was a one-off. That was about just try to give some value just so that I would get an in, really to begin with. To be honest, I wasn't thinking about getting an in. That's not fair. I just thought it would be great to meet those guys and to experience going there. So once I'd done the talk, though, they then invited me back. I didn't try and pitch them anything. And from there, I was involved in something called the Global Founders Skills Accelerator, so GFSA, as they would probably call it. And I flew back and forward. I honestly can't remember how many times. This was 2012, 2013. And the end result of all this was, what I was doing was really, it was like a small part of the pitching work that I would do with a corporate client when I usually work with them. Mainly it was about pressure testing them in terms of their pitch. So they would pitch me in ones, twos, or maybe the whole team.
Right.
We would video it, and then we would assess it together, and we would look at how they could improve it. So it wasn't like I was teaching a whole class. It was kind of short, sharp interventions, having an outside eye who worked with, kind of usually bigger business clients, to be honest, but working with these startup teams. And the end result of this was Bill called me into the kind of meeting room there with some of the staff. And he said, Thor, in recognition of what you've done with our teams, I'd like to make you an EIR.
Yeah.
Now,
you're like, what is this?
Yeah, I have no clue.
Like, well, tell me what it is first.
It was a little embarrassing. It obviously seemed like something really special, but
It is.
I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur for a start, so I didn't even know what it was. And the other kind of members of his team were probably looking at me like I was a fool or ungrateful, but I was trying to look grateful. I just didn't know what it was.
This sounds great. Tell me more.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we worked that out, and I only, to be honest though, I kind of ended it on my LinkedIn profile after 18 months or a couple of years because I was no longer going across there, and I I've no idea how it works and whether you're supposed. I mean, it's kind of an honorary title. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
never.
so EIR is entrepreneur in residence. A lot of accelerators and some universities use it. They kind of have an entrepreneur that has their own business, which you do, and we'll get to that next. They've got their own business and they've got some sort of skill set that could also be shared with students or other startups and those things. So EIRs can be in different facets. You could actually be, compensated by the organization you work with, or you may just be a mentor and it's like an honorary title. It goes in a lot of different ways, but it's definitely a prestigious thing to have gotten from MIT. So tell us how you got into this idea of sort of coaching startups on pitching?
Yeah. So how did it come about in the first place? Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. I mean, I have been a coach really since I left university. I've pretty much always run my own thing of some kind. I was a fitness personal trainer for years. I trained some athletes, boxer, some business people. But how did it happen? So the first time I ever had to do a presentation or a public speech myself, I guess would have been my late 20s. And I always volunteer for things. So I was asked to do it by this kind of prestigious health and country club where they'd headhunted me to be their personal trainer. They'd recruited me.
Gotcha.
And they said, oh, it'll be great. You'll meet some of these high net worth clients and, it'll be a really positive experience and you'll get some clients. So I just said, oh, yeah, cool. I'll do it.
Why not?
Exactly. I had like a 3-week lead up period and each day I would get just a little more nervous and a little more nervous. And by the end of these 3 weeks, I'll be honest with you.
You're like, get me out of here.
Jonathan, I was completely terrified, man. I had a Land Rover then, a Land Rover Discovery, and I was driving along this river. It's the River Dee. It's a beautiful drive. But I was driving along Deeside, along this river, and it's lined with trees. And I started this weird mental game where I was like, should I crash into those trees? And if I did, what speed do I need to be doing?
All because you had a presentation, right?
Yeah, not to. Was the first one I'd ever done though. You got to remember, I was a pretty confident guy. I was physically fit at the time, not anymore, but I was physically really fit at the time. I was kind of on top of my game in some ways, but I'd never done a presentation. It was weird. I know. I had never had to do it at school, never had to do it at university. A real miss. So what I wanted to do was just to hobble myself, enough to end up in hospital, but not to kill myself. I wasn't suicidal. It wasn't that bad. I don't fear it more than death. But I was scared. I'll be honest. I didn't do that, obviously. I went there. I did it. It felt terrifying. I felt traumatized, I got some new clients, so it can't have gone that badly.
Right.
So that was my first experience. But obviously, I didn't get into becoming a pitch coach at that stage. That was many years later. And in between times, I've been to drama school. I worked a little while as a professional actor, not a very good one, or you all would recognize me.
But do you think some of that added to what you do now? I mean, if I'm piecing things together, just make sure I'm not wrong. But I mean, I'm thinking through drama school, acting. I mean, there's a whole preparatory effort that goes into getting, learning your lines, being able to present them naturally, which is all stuff that you have to do from a startup to pitch. So did you just find yourself that you sort of ended up cumulatively getting some experiences and doing more presentations, and all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, I've kind of got this down?
Actually, it happened a lot quicker than that in the end. By the way, my apologies to your listeners if we can't edit that out. I thought I'd hit my little button here to mute myself so I could have a big cough, and then I just did a big loud cough.
You got it. you were right on it.
Man. Okay, so it actually happened way quicker than that, because what happened is I knew I needed to talk for my personal training business at that time. I knew I needed it as a marketing strategy. It was part of what I needed to do. And I remembered the trauma of the time many years before when I'd done it. So by this time, I've done my acting training and everything. So I'm even more confident, but it doesn't mean I know how to pitch or present. You see those top actors up there at the Oscars, they can't necessarily present. The two things are not automatically linked. So I found a mentor. I found a guy who I knew at the gym who's a very successful business speaker, a guy called Bob Keeler. And he was a CEO of a big company. I don't know what that company was at the time, probably 10,000 people. So it's a pretty big company. He's a great speaker, very funny, very successful speaker, public speaker. And I said, Bob, can you give me some advice, some help on this? And I told him what had happened the time before. And he says, I've got something for you, buddy. And I've found out since he's got a wicked sense of humor. So what I got later that day was an email. And in the subject header was Thor's challenge.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Now, I'd asked him for help. And as I said, I'm a guy that likes to volunteer, Jonathan. So I knew I was going to have to do whatever this challenge was. So here's your challenge. Now, I thought maybe he's going to introduce me to the Rotary Club or some local networking thing
Right.
for some experience in front of like 20 people.
Right.
It was to deliver an after-dinner speech to about 100 of Scotland's business leaders. So the head of some really big companies, big banks, the Commonwealth Games Committee, and the real stinger for me, for some reason, I'm not a religious man, but it was the Archbishop of Glasgow.
Wow.
I was like, oh no, the Archbishop's going to be there. So here's the thing, though. Here's where the challenge came in. It was 7 days time. So this was the middle of the week, and it was the middle of the following week.
Yeah.
Bob was not a mentor to leave you high and dry, though. No. He handed me a sheaf of notes from an old course he'd done.
He said, read these.
Notes. Yeah, he says, here, use this, son. Thanks, Bob. So on the morning of the talk, he pressure tested me, which is a crucial part of any pitch or presentation, as you know.
Right.
So I had a process because I had these notes, and it was a good course. It's a course called Articulus. Guy Dan Reel, based in Detroit in the USA. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. If you can afford it, you should do it, people. Tell Dan I said hi. And he pressure tested me, and I went and did it. And you know what? I was a little nervous, but it was nothing like the time before. It wasn't the same trauma, and I got probably the bit of feedback I'm the proudest of. So I've memorized it. It was something like, if it's a call to action you require, Thor Holt is your man. And that was from somebody at the thing, wrote me that afterwards. And
right.
The actual talk was a pretty crazy topic because I used to be the trustee of a drug rehab. Do you call it? Yeah, it's the same name in the States.
Yep, absolutely.
A drug rehab unit. I was a trustee and a coach there for a while. So the title, which I didn't tell them, was Inspirational Tales of Heroin Addicts and Alcoholics I Have Known. So I had some really cool stories in it, and it went down well because they wanted a social entrepreneurial topic.
Absolutely.
And so it was cool. And to be honest, I was hooked. So then for the next couple of years,
what hooked you on it?
So what hooked me was it reminded me of acting. You're in the moment, and it was that leverage thing where you can build a relationship with like 100 people at once, or 10 people at once, or 3 people at once in a pitch, rather than it just being one person at a time. And the kind of electricity that goes between you, the speaker, or the actor or performer, or whatever you want to call it, that kind of electric current of it can go right, it can go wrong. It's just exciting, man. I mean, it's an exciting way to communicate, isn't it? And I think that's what hooked me.
And do you feel it's your natural state of communication? I'm just curious. I've had this conversation with Chris Marr, who introduced us, by the way, and we were on his podcast that's live now. We were talking, and he and I were saying both of our natural states is vocal, not written. Not that we're bad writers, but it's just we're better with the spoken word. Do you feel like that's your natural state of communication?
It's a great question. I might have to take some time to think about that. I really, it's a good question. I like it. I'll probably go away and write about that actually, because I also enjoy writing to think.
Okay.
But I also enjoy speaking to think.
Is there one that comes out quicker for you though? Like when you're producing your own content, I know you've got your own website that you do things on. Is there one that sort of just seems naturally, like for me, to give you a moment to ponder? For me, when I'm writing, it takes me a long time, not just because of the effort of writing, but because I write and it doesn't flow always cleanly from my thought process to how I'm going to structure paragraphs or sentences and things like that. Versus when I'm speaking at a conference or something, I don't know if you've seen the movie with Will Ferrell. It's a movie called Old School. It's a couple of years old now. And Will Ferrell gets on a debate team with a bunch of younger college students, and they ask him a really tough question, and he kind of goes blank, and he gives this amazing answer. I mean, it's just amazing, right? I mean, everybody's like, how did he come up with that? And he kind of snaps out of it, and I always think of myself that way. Not that my answers are that brilliant, but when I get up and I tend to speak in front of an audience, it almost just comes naturally. I don't have to try. I'm sure I got nervous early on, but now that I've done it so much, it doesn't faze me. It just happens. So I was just curious for you, since I'm seeing some recurring themes with guests. Do you feel that instinctually written may be less easy for you to communicate than with the spoken word?
I'd say yes, Jonathan. I mean, I spoke at a debate at the weekend on one of one of your countrymen, there was a debate about Donald Trump in my old homeland of Shetland, which is a couple of 100 miles north of Scotland.
Okay.
Some islands. And I mean, it's hard to beat the buzz that you feel when you're in the middle of it, in the middle of the debate or the presentation or the talk, and then the feeling afterwards when you've got the interaction with people who've kind of been affected by what you've said or the thoughts or the stories that you and your debating partners have come out with. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that spoken would be more natural to me for sure, but it's also been harder to get to in terms of there's more fear, I guess. There's more nervousness, more fear, more anxiety around it.
If a paragraph doesn't read right, you can, backspace or erase it or whatever you want to do. Once you're speaking, it's out there. It's especially if it's live. I mean, it's just out there. So how interesting.
And I guess if you're, sorry, I was going to say, and if you're there, if you're pitching and you need that investment to make the business keep working, for example, there's even more pressure, isn't there? So there's, and every time you add a pressure to yourself, then just makes it harder to do, I guess. So yeah, no, that's.
Well, maybe we could transition into that. Maybe we could talk about some of the work you do with folks pitching for investment, and maybe go into some of your tips that you have off the top of your head that you tend to find yourself recommending on a regular basis to folks.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying, as I said at the start with the MIT story, I do not in any way pretend to be some big entrepreneur or some mega successful businessman. I'm not. I have made a living for me and my family for many years, but I'm not super businessman. However, something really interesting is going on right now for me in that I am a shareholder in a startup myself.
Tell us about it.
It's not a tech startup, but it's technology, and you're going to laugh.
Not at all.
But you might.
We have all forms of guests on here, Thor. I mean, that's the reason I'm doing this. I don't want to just focus on tech and things like that. I want to hear all entrepreneurs.
I'm going to challenge you not to laugh, Jonathan. So hold yourself together. This is the future of the water closet, of the toilet, of the lavatory, of the John.
Absolutely. No,
I'm laughing.
Well, it's a humorous subject sometimes, and people play on it. But I mean, it could be a broken process. Tell us quickly. I mean, what's the startup? What's the name of it, and what's the sort of the 60-second on it?
The actual product is Glydro, which comes from an Icelandic name, which the founder can give you way more detail on. And then the company name is Bubble Bog. But basically, it's an aspirated toilet. So air is injected into the John, into the toilet. And the benefits, if you like, there are lots of them. But some of the benefits that we are pretty sure are the big ones are infection control in a medical environment.
Okay.
Because there are much less aerosols, much less escape of molecules, water, whatever, infected or could be. Lack of smell because of a vacuum that's set up within the unit. Lack of splashback, which I noticed was a big deal when my little girl was being taught to build what the Canadians apparently call a poo canoe. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well done. You're still not laughing. This is good. That one makes people laugh.
Business happens everywhere,
Yeah, for sure. Business does happen everywhere. Here's a question for you and your American listeners.
Yes.
How are you guys so courageous when it comes to going to the John? Because if you go to the public toilets in America, you've got these doors, right? So the door's there, and then at the side of the door, there's like a gap. And you guys have got no fear.
I'm laughing because I'm with you now. Yeah.
You sit on the John. You don't care about the fact that be like hi to people, hi as they go by. Right. It's amazing. You put a man on the moon, but you haven't worked out how to make the doors the right size to fit on those.
You know what? It's interesting you say that. What I might venture to say from personal experience, especially traveling and being in airports and things like that, necessity. I mean, it's what you got to do, and it's choices, But I would venture to say that there are more people than you might imagine who find it. They plan their trips, they try and be strategic on when they go, so that there's less people in there, or which facility they use. And I would venture to say people are more strategic than you might imagine.
Well, that makes sense. And when you start speaking to people about this, you find out that pretty much everyone is strategic. That's a beautiful way you put it. I might use that in our pitch.
Please.
Anyway, because so many people are, because they worry about the noise, the smell that they create in other people's bathrooms. There's all kinds of things, and we're aiming to beat a load of those things. So we've been on the go for maybe 18 months now. This thing's in development. There's a lot of moving parts.
Were you working with them on a pitch? How'd you get involved personally?
Actually, I pitched myself into it. I knew the founder. He'd created this thing. I saw it at his 40th birthday party a few years before.
Okay.
I met up with him socially and I said, "What's happening with this thing?" He said, "Oh, basically nothing." He'd done nothing with it because he has another pretty high-flying job as he's an airline pilot. And he's a busy guy. He's got kids. He's got his job. So I just said, "Look, bud, nothing's going to happen with this unless you cut somebody else in on it. So give me 50% of it and I'll make stuff happen." And he said, 50%? He tried me with 10, I think. And I said, "Well, but you've done nothing with it for like 4 years or whatever. You're going to do nothing with it."
At that point, it's just sitting there. Yeah.
So he saw the error of his ways and off we went. But anyway, since then, we've taken on some investment and we had to go pitch for that. And I guess that's where I was reminded of my own lessons that I teach when I'm working with people on pitches or presentations, and I'm not applying today. Be brief.
Yeah, yeah.
That guy, you need to give that guy the idea or that lady, whatever. You need to be able to tell them it in 30 seconds. And I'm not talking about an elevator pitch, but I do mean you need to get the point across quick.
Right.
Because otherwise, you still need to back it up for half an hour or whatever, but give them all the numbers and all the good stuff.
So not necessarily always brief, but concise. Being able to get your point, the pain point down quickly so that a potential investor recognizes that they agree, yes, this is a pain point and I need to hear how you're solving it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can take quite a while. I mean, one of the things in terms of any pitch or presentation of any kind, actually, one of the things that I think I bring to it is a certain determination and discipline that probably does come from the acting. And that's not just in the rehearsal process leading up to a pitch, although I do apply it there. I've had people in tears on many occasions, but they thank me for it later. But it's the discipline of just keep on pushing and knocking away at this thing until we get like the core message, like what is the real point you're trying to get across and why. And obviously there's a lot to that in terms of who you're speaking to, just the usual sensible marketing stuff, but applied to a presentation, which many people don't do. To remind ourselves, well, who precisely are we talking to and who's the decision maker and what do they care about? What might their challenging questions be? If they were having a cynical day because they'd had too many whiskeys the night before, what would they say if they were being brutal? How would they challenge you? How would they question you? And I get people to self-generate a load of difficult questions, challenging questions. Sure, they can generate some easy, helpful questions, and you might want to answer those in your pitch. But you need to be able to answer all the challenging questions, and you need to probably build some of that into your pitch.
That's the really most good difficult stuff.
The more people can take the head out of their sand or out of the John or whatever their head is and be brutally honest. And if there's a team, all of you chuck in your negative questions. This is the time to be negative. And the more of that negativity you can get out and then answer, and some of it you might not be able to answer. That's okay, but you're probably best to be honest about that if it comes up.
Yeah, so when you coach them on, that's really great stuff. So when you coach them on presenting, you're challenging them to ask themselves lots of hard questions. Do you suggest that coming from a certain place? Is that with co-founders, friends, family, coaches like yourself? Is there somewhere you prefer that to come from? Because I wonder if it's easy for my co-founders to lay off me a little bit and not give me the really hard ones.
Do you know what? I'll give you a quick story.
Perfect.
And that is, a guy was recommended to me once, and he had a big pitch for his company. And it was only 3 days away, and it was a Sunday. And I said, I'll see him anyway because the guy's short on time. So he came around to my place on Sunday, and he ran his pitch, and it was the worst, man. It was like 25 or 30 PowerPoint slides covered in text, and it was boring. It didn't differentiate. It was just terrible. And I said, what are you avoiding? Like, what is the thing that you just desperately don't want to talk about?
Great question.
And he said, well, he started laughing, and then he said, well, I'm just not going to talk about that, so it's irrelevant. And I said, no, play with me here. Just tell me what it is. So apparently what had happened is the same client, big company client, they had done a project for a couple of hours, 5 years before, I think it was 5 years or 6 years before. And he said, he kept saying, don't worry though, all the management are changed. They won't remember anything about this situation. I said, come on, tell me the story. So they'd done this project and they'd had to double bill for something because they'd had to bring in another partner company to help source something. I can't remember what it was. It doesn't matter, but they'd had to build a bigger kind of extended subcontracting team basically, and they'd had a change order, a variation order. They had to bill more because of that. And what it meant was and the terrible thing was they hadn't communicated this to the client company. So they got billed a lot more. And there was this other kind of shadow partner who'd been involved in delivery. So on the day of the launch of this piece of kit, this third party showed up and was like shaking hands with the client and saying, we're so proud to have been involved in this. Made the guy feel like an idiot, basically. Yeah. Never mind the money side of it. But it was just a communication breakdown, really, at heart. Anyway, the point is, this guy who'd run his pitch to me said, but don't worry, Thor, they're not going to know about that. And I said, well, I think you might find that you're legendary in the company, but even if they don't know about it, I really think we need to have you ready to answer questions on that. And personally, I'd want to build it into your pitch to show complete transparency, because you can tell them, here's what happened, in case you guys don't know. Here are the lessons we've learned, and here are the changes we've made in our systems and in our team to make sure that will never happen again. And anyway, we did it for a good reason. We did it to get the job completed on time. We didn't do it on budget, but we did it on time. So I suggested complete transparency. Now, the reason I tell that story is often the most challenging questions can actually come from the very people that are going to go and deliver the pitch, if you can get them to be brutally honest with themselves.
Yeah. That's so good, Thor. I mean, that's a great suggestion, because you find that not being brutally honest, not being transparent is just the wrong way to go. I mean, we're talking about what does investing in a startup come down to? It comes down to trust, because you're trusting that team to go out and enact a game plan, right? And if you're not being brutally honest, there's no trust. I mean, there just can't be. Mm-hmm. And so then you see it go down the wrong road because things didn't come out, and an investor's going, well, you didn't tell me about that. My due diligence didn't uncover it. And the founder's left kind of, you're not likely to get a subsequent follow-up round with that investor if they don't trust you and you weren't transparent. So concise, transparent. What other suggestions would you have for folks that are building a pitch? You talked about practice. Maybe we could go into that for a second. Yeah. So is there a way in which you suggest they practice? Is it through video? How do you have any recommendations on practicing?
Well, whatever number of times you think you're going to practice, you should almost certainly do more. That's the first thing, because virtually everyone ducks out of that. And I know the temptation. I've been tempted myself. Speaking of that debate at the weekend, you think, well, I've run it 3 times. That'll be fine.
I got it down.
And then you're like, wait a minute. I actually should run that let's just do it another time. So I have a 5 times rule. And I try and apply that with clients, where I want them 5 times on their feet running it as if it's for real. Yeah. Now, if we're going to use a camera, great. If they won't use a camera, that's okay. But that's my rule, is a rule of 5. Now, different people are different. Some people are so smart. I mean, maybe it's a 1 in 1,000. Some people are so smart, they can just wing it. That's so rare that it's irrelevant, though. In the general population, choose a rule, go with it, try it. But I say 5 times as if it's for real. Whether it's a pitch, a presentation.
Yeah, not in your head, not kind of looking at your notes. You're actually as close to standing on the stage as you can, or in front of someone, and you're doing the presentation with
ideally,
slides and everything.
Well, whatever you're going to use. I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of slides, but I don't dislike them either. And often they're expected, and you might well need them for whatever reason. They're just another tool, though. I don't think of them as the pitch.
Perfect.
The pitch,
yes,
the pitch is everything. It's you, the team, it's the environment, it's the before communication, the after communication. That's the pitch. It's everything about you. There's a reason why an investor will invest a certain amount of money with you, and then he'll say, and off the books, I'm willing to lend you however many more million without any equity, because I trust you. That's because the whole pitch was right. The before, the after, the trust. Whereas if you're just obsessed about having a beautiful deck, well, anyone that's good at graphics and PowerPoint can create a beautiful deck. So what?
Good. Absolutely.
It's not about that. So, but in terms of rehearsal, when you think you've done enough, do one more time. I mean, it's probably that simple. It's the same as, well, you used to fight too, and it's the same as fighting. You think you're skilled enough. Do you know what? Let's roll for another hour.
Always somebody better.
Absolutely. Most of them are better than me. Watch, I think my nose folds one way. Which way is it? Oh, it's that way. There we go.
Fantastic. I love those last tidbits, particularly just saying that I want people to take this away, so I'm going to restate it. And if I miss it, correct me. But everyone focuses on the pitch being the deck, and maybe even the words that come with it. But what you're saying is the pitch is really everything that comes before it, And I would agree with this part. It's everything that comes after it, right? Because when you're presenting, so many people think the idea of presenting, the goal of presenting is to get in that investment, which would be great. But usually what the goal is to get a subsequent follow-up conversation. So you're saying, look, folks, it is the entire process, not just those 10 to 15 slides, or in the case of your client, you're talking about 25 slides. This is that 10 to 15 slides. Let's focus on this whole thing being a pitch per se. That's so good, Thor. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you nailed it, man. Anyone would think you'd done a few pitches yourself.
A couple. Yeah. A few. So very, very cool stuff. Well, I want to honor your time, and what I know we could talk for forever. So I think probably look at maybe getting you back, or not maybe, definitely get you back on and go through some more of that. But I know you've left plenty of value for people already. So what I'd like to do is give you a chance for your own personal business. If there's somewhere someone would like to reach out to you and connect with you, is there somewhere you'd like for them to go? Your website or Twitter? Or?
Yeah, my website is my name, thorholt.com, thorholt.com. And when you go there, you'll see something called Thorts, Thorts, which is my blog, my thoughts. A client came up with that. It wasn't me.
Perfect.
There's a writer podcast, because I got an interest in freedom and writing and all kinds of things, which kind of goes along with what I do for work, because it's all about people's freedom. But never mind, we can go into that some other time. But yeah, thorholt.com, thorholt.com. Same on Twitter, @thorholt.
Fantastic.
And I'd love to hear from people. I mean, and if people were interested in that, the email, the MIT email, the PDF,
send it to me, and we'll attach it to the blog post for people to download. Okay. And then I'll also, in the show notes and the blog post with the video, I'll put links to your site and Twitter account and those type of things, so that people can get in front of you. And like I said, love to have you back again, but thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Superb. Really enjoyed it. And I'd like to hear more from you next time, sir, because you got a lot of expertise in there.
We'll connect for sure. Thanks a lot.
Cool, man. See you again, Jonathan. Bye.
You too.